We'll talk about consulting as a career abroad. And I'm very, very glad to welcome Maansi in today's session. Maansi, if you can join us. Hello, Maansi.
Hey, how are you, Anand?
I'm doing good. For the benefit of our viewers, Maansi is a strategy consultant. She works for a company called Strategy and based out of Dubai. Well, her credentials are impeccable. She's done, she's actually visited two of the best schools across the world. She first went to ISB, spent a couple of months there before I guess she decided to move on and then got herself admitted into the INSEAD program. Where she obviously had a very successful stint. And since then, she's now been working full time as a consultant. So welcome on board, Maansi. I hope that we're not disturbing you on this.
On my weekend. No, all good. Thank you for having me. It's always nice to speak to college students, particularly, I think.
Absolutely. I think takes you back in time in a sense. So let's start your journey from college, because that's the theme that we're touching upon. How were you as a college student? Because the general sense that we have of consultants, that these are people who are achievers, who are super achievers in a sense, always end up doing well in college, school, and so on. Were you that kind of a student?
So my undergrad was also Delhi University. So just for everyone's background, I also went to DU. I graduated in 2013 from Gargi.
Okay.
Studying economics. I'm assuming some people here would also be studying economics. As a college student, Anand, I like to study a little bit. So I think I was very sure that I attended my classes and all somehow, but I think I also did a degree in dance for 3 years, actually. So I think economics was my second degree. I was dancing through college. I think a lot of people here would also be in societies, and it's a part of being in DU, right? Like we just engage in different kind of societies and whatnot. But is that like resonating with what I'm doing now? Because I've done multiple things in between, and my first job was not that of a consultant. Right. So college was great in that sense. But yeah, I don't think I was a super achiever or anything. My focus was like, oh, how do I get to dance class? How do I do like choreo society and stuff like that?
Okay. I think that's a very reassuring thought for most students here, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, but we're also in the middle of, these students are also in the middle of this rat race of deciding career choices, making career choices and working towards that. So I think it's very reassuring that some of the achievers also played it by the year back in college.
Yeah, completely.
Wonderful. All right. So tell us about your first job. So you clearly are saying that in college, you didn't really think about that far ahead about consulting or getting in. So how did that transition happen? What were your first couple of?
I did not even know what consulting was back in undergrad properly. I was not very well aware of what the job market looks like in general, because I think our purview of like the job market is what comes on campus.
Right.
Right. So those 10 companies is what the job market looks like. It's Google, it's Standard & Poor, it's a couple of EY, PwC, but we at least back then, if I remember, I thought they were mostly like a lot of CA people are going and doing that job there. So I didn't know how those big fours are broken down. Not at all. Like some people used to say they do tax there, some people do audit there, some people do advisory there. And those are just words we'd heard of, and without having a sense of what these firms really do. And as you said, you're in such a rat race when you're in undergrad, because there's so much pressure, especially in third year, of like society of what are you going to do next. And I think at that time I was thinking of also doing an MBA from an Indian school. And I was trying to prepare for CAT. And then the first company that came on campus was S&P 500, and it's this big company that you've heard of because you see the index and everything. It's not what we were going to do, but I interviewed and I got through, and it was literally the first firm I interviewed and I got through. And back then, that I was like, okay, now I can stop studying for CAT. Now I have a job. And without knowing what I was putting my foot into, I don't think I just started, like, I was very like, go with the flow. I'm going to start earning money finally. So, take that leap of faith and just start off with the career of that. So I wasn't thinking much, to be honest. And I think now people just have access to so many more people with platforms such as this, or like some, in general, now connectivity is so much more. Back then it was BlackBerry days. So it was like BBM. We didn't have like that kind of networking opportunities or, options to do that.
I think DU has also come a long way since then. Now you have the big three, actually, some of the big three firms coming to DU campuses and hiring from there. So
yeah.
These are people who are getting, I mean, some of the students here probably get a look into the Bains and the BCGs of the world.
Yes. Yeah, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG. I think we all hear these names, right? And you know that this is all that comes on campus. That's what I'm saying. These are the 10 companies that come on campus. But at that time, you're just like, give me any job.
Right. So I think that's a reassuring thought. If you're on campus and obviously you're targeting one of the top firms, maybe the top big four, even if you don't make it into one of those firms, I think the future is still bright, right? You can still make your way into some of these, into the world of consulting. All right. So you worked with Standard and Poor, and I guess you also worked after that for a South Asian firm. You were working for the South Asian market for that company. I'm sorry,
for the Dutch firm,
Dutch company. Sorry.
Yeah. So I started my career with when I was in college. I did 2 internships. So backtracking, my first internship was with Perfetti.
Okay.
So the Alpenliebe company. Then my second internship was with a subsidiary of Sanofi in Amsterdam. And then my first job, as you just said, was with S&P. And with S&P, with the role as research associate. So I think it was a good starting point of the career, just to understand, because as the research associate, you're sitting and like researching companies all day. Sure. I think that also gave me a purview of what lays out there. But I don't think I enjoyed research as much, like just research, because I was not executing, I was not talking to clients, and I wanted to do something that was more dynamic. And actually, I remember when I was switching from S&P, Grant Thornton, which is also another consulting firm, I interviewed with them, and I was picking out between Grant Thornton, entering consulting back then, and the job that I did with a startup. And I ended up doing the startup then, but I did look at consulting at that point, and I didn't do it.
Right.
That was more, I think, that was the only time I interviewed with a couple of Indian consulting firms.
Okay.
And then I worked for the startup for about 2 years. They were based in the Netherlands, and I was managing the South Asian market for them, and then the MBAs.
Yeah. All right. So you did start thinking about consulting when in your stint at S&P. But I'm curious. I mean, most of us, you said you started college thinking about CAD, and then you got your first job, and all thoughts of CAD vanished from your mind. And then 2 years later, you're a little bored with the kind of work you're doing at S&P. Didn't think about an MBA then?
I did.
Huh? Okay.
I think I told you this when we spoke last time also. That is when, so my options probably would have been IIM Shillong, because I did do the CAD and I did get into one of the IIMs back then. Consulting, startup. So these were a few options, when I was trying to quit or like move out of S&P at the time.
So how does, since you've seen both sides of this MBA debate, right? One is the CAT route, getting into the IIMs and getting through that rigmarole, and at the other end is the GMAT, and it's a whole different experience applying through the GMAT. So how would you compare, in your personal experience, not an opinion about the tests themselves, but in your personal opinion, what was it? How would you compare apples and oranges in a sense?
Yeah. Oh God, I'm so happy for the last 2 years of not finally studying. I think I've started studying since like 2010. So I think with the CAT and the GMAT, it's CAT is tougher. Let's just put it that way. It is a tougher exam. It's a harder one to crack, I felt. And I think preparing for the CAT kind of like prepared me for the GMAT as well.
Absolutely.
So I think, but I also was, it's a funny journey, because if I look back, I was kind of like giving the exam every now and then. I used to keep studying in between. No, this year I will crack it. This year I will do something else. This year I'll do the GMAT. And that's what I'm saying. I'm finally not studying for the last 1.5 years. I'm so happy. But I think I studied too. Like I used to just like, I wanted to keep myself in the momentum of like, okay, if I have to give an exam, and it's quant and verbal, right? So I think overall that's the difference. I think in general, like you don't need to do such an extensive application for the Indian schools, right?
Yes.
Indian schools in the sense of the CAT route, you don't have to do such extensive applications. It's not that big a worry. Honestly, your profile is not that big a worry compared to a GMAT application where like you're applying to schools and you're writing down essays and re-reviews and whatnot. I don't know if the system is still the same.
It's evolved a little bit. I think today, if you get a shortlist from an Ahmedabad or a Bangalore, there is a subsequent form that
Oh,
with,
okay,
with
okay,
essays and stuff.
okay,
Um,
okay. I
so
don't think we had that back then. We did not have essays back then.
no, maybe 5 or 6 years back, it wasn't much of a practice. One or two selected schools were doing that,
Correct.
but not
Yeah.
everybody. But I love the fact that you used the word momentum, and I think this if you guys need to take something away from this section of our discussion, it's that if you're preparing for competitive exams, do not lose hope. I think you need to carry momentum year on year, right? It sometimes builds early, which means in my experience, I've seen people crack it the first time around, but then some others take 3 years or 4 years. And I mean, from Mansi's own words, I think it's more the continually keeping at it continually and just building that momentum year on year, which really creates an impact.
And it's really like, I think that this is actually a key takeaway even from me. And like, I was speaking to a student some time back, and he was in a situation of like, okay, I've given my GMAT. Should I look for a job now, or should I apply to colleges now? Should I study now? And that's what I feel. I was like, we can't be unidirectional. Some people are lucky, okay? We have to accept lucky, and some people are very good at, giving an exam and like clearing it in the first go. I don't think I was one of the lucky ones in the sense I would give an exam and it was automatically like, I would reach an IIM or an INSEAD in one go. Right. I knew I had to like pace it out, put my eggs in a few baskets, figure it out, interview multiple firms. I think I'm also risk averse that way. I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket, so I'll spread it out a little bit.
All right.
It's a different approach. Some people like to be like focused on just one thing, which is also good. I think we need to figure out what works for you.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm just taking a look at the poll results that have come by. I know not many of you have responded, but the ones that have, it seems to suggest that you're all going to pass out in 2 years, and you're all from a commerce management background, and you guys have a prior inclination. Some of you are at least interested / inclined towards consulting. I like that. And most people are saying undecided about whether to study right now or not, which is a good thing. So I think based on that, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is about preparedness, right? Because these are students in college, and I'm sure that the dominant thought here is, how do I create a profile that either gets me into B school or gets me a look into one of the top consulting firms?
Right.
And by your own words, you said that you had this profile which is kind of typical of a DU student, having studied in college, good academics, also participated in clubs and societies, a dancer. Was there a conscious effort on your part? You mentioned internships. Was there a conscious effort on your part to get a few talking points on your resume? And which of those do you think created the biggest impact on admission panels?
It's an interesting question. I don't think there was, I know if I backtrack second year of college, there was a conscious effort in terms of what's going on my resume. Okay. But I think honestly, like that's such a, I would really encourage, and that's what, I was dancing, as I just said. And that was not a conscious effort for me to put anything on my resume related to dancing. I was doing it because I love doing it. And I think, but I also understand in college, you keep thinking, oh, maybe I joined this committee and I can put that on my resume. Maybe I join XYZ and I do ISEC, or I don't know, there were multiple other things. And that is one way to look at it, show ownership, show leadership. But I would definitely encourage students to do it in places where they genuinely enjoy doing it. For example, the couple of internships, back then, if I remember, I had 2 internships in undergrad, right? And one was an abroad internship. And for someone graduating in like after 3 years, certain people did internships, some people did not do internships in DU, and it's totally normal. Did I do it for the resume? Maybe the starting point, yes. If I look back, will I encourage anyone to do some stuff for the resume? No, but that's like wisdom of life. After 10 years, I can say that. But that's what I'm saying. It's like try to enjoy things and like do stuff. Like as we say, like momentum. We have to keep that going, right? Like if you're finding it in a society, if you're finding it in, running, like helping an NGO over the weekend, whatever's making you happy, just give yourself to it for sure. And that really helps you in different phases of life in general, like when you're interviewing, it shows that ownership side.
Okay, I think your point about internships is definitely very very potent, because yes, absolutely. I think most students at Hansraj College are going to be competitive. So I'm sure everybody is thinking about, okay, summer break coming up. When and where do I intern? But I think, that is an important facet, and I'm still surprised that most students in college do not consider internships as seriously. So so great that you put that stress on that. But I think enjoy what you do is your.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. So now we move on to the next phase of your life, right? You've gone to college, you've had these trepidations and thoughts, okay? But finally, you managed to crack the ISB, right?
Yes.
And for most of us sitting in this audience today, I think getting into ISB is itself a dream.
Yes.
So what happened? Why did you? Why then did you move beyond ISB? How did that happen? INSEAD, were you already applying parallelly, or did you apply after you got in?
Yeah, I just feel I'm not a content person.
I think all consultants are that way. I think by nature you need to be.
It's one of the terms one of my friends used at INSEAD. It's called REO, restless, insecure, overachievers. Like, you're always like restless. When you achieve something, you're like, okay, what's next? What's the next thing I can crack? That's not to say that's not why I left ISB. I think I had explored the situation of the whole Indian business school dynamic quite deeply by the time I reached ISB.
Yeah.
But before ISB, I was working for a startup, a Dutch startup.
Right.
And because of that, I traveled to like a couple of different markets.
Oh.
And I think one of the partners in the accelerator that I worked with, he was an INSEAD alum.
Okay.
And I attended a wedding, and then there were like a lot of INSEAD alums there. So I just met people, and I was just intrigued by the global vision of the school, and just it's just one of those things, in terms of diversity, the kind of people that were there. And I was like, I want to experience it, but it kind of seemed like a dream that I couldn't catch. So it's like, okay, again, hedge my risk, apply to more schools. And that's when ISB happened, I didn't know if I was going to get called from INSEAD or not. So I took it. I stayed there for 5 months. So I almost did half the MBA.
Of course, yeah.
But ISB was great, and I totally understand. I think we'd heard about ISB in undergrad. Yeah. And it is a prestigious business school in India, and I had some seniors from high school who went there. Anyone who was cracking ISB was like, brilliant. And that's true. The school is great. The network is amazing. The Indian network is great at ISB. I just think I wanted a more global network and that global experience. So I just thought that, okay, now I can move on. And it was a matter of time and opportunity cost, but it kind of worked out.
Absolutely. I think that there are two key takeaways from what you just said, right? One, mentorship, because I think the sort of transition in thought process changed when you met this pool of ISB INSEAD alums. And in some small way, that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, give people access to mentors. And I think the second takeaway for me is this perspective you had of just being global in outlook, right? And I think a lot of students in our audience need to sort of get that vibe, get that feeling, is that in today's world, we are, literally speaking, we are actually transcending borders. EdTech and FinTech are doing really well. E-commerce is doing really well. I think if you're looking to make a mark in a global sense, do target some of the top B schools like INSEAD, right? So that's Okay, I think that gives a little bit of sort of.
You need the thing with studying abroad with some of the schools is, and most of the schools actually studying abroad, unless you're looking at an MIM program.
Correct.
I think with an MBA abroad, you need experience.
Correct.
Unlike Indian schools where you can get away with 1-2 years, with abroad, it's highly encouraged. You work for a few years, see what the market looks like, get your hands dirty on ground, because then you will get the value of a business school also a lot more. Compared to, I think in India, I've seen a lot of people, would want to do their, and I did at one point, right? I was giving the cat. So I was also like getting to do the MBA early on in the career versus later on.
Right. So do you interact with MIM grads in your workspace? Do you?
A little bit, yes. I think we just graduated the first or the second MIM class at INSEAD because they just launched the program now. So I've now started speaking to students who are either graduating or going for their MIM, and they're younger, right? They're much younger, but they are also looking at consulting opportunities abroad. And for some of them, it is a good way to also start your career abroad, right? Okay. It's a good foot into the market, a foot into the network, because they get access to this huge alumni and these companies that do come on campuses and stuff. It's just earlier on in your career, why not?
Correct. And I think, this is a point that needs to be sort of reinforced, is the fact that, with under 2 years of experience, you can still target one of the global B schools, right? And INSEAD, typically you apply, I think, with maybe 5 or so years of experiences when you really think you have a serious cut. But the MIM program is different. You can actually apply straight out of college, and it still gives you, I mean, I don't think we can say it gives you the same opportunities, but it gives you comparable opportunities based on your profile. And that's what
it's just the level you will enter the firm is going to be different.
Which is right.
Which is obvious, because you have different experience for different levels when you enter a firm.
Let's make that specific about consulting. So let's say consulting firm hires an MBA from INSEAD and then go looks at an MIM grad from INSEAD or something.
I don't know, but like, for example, I joined Strategy and as a senior associate after an MBA, and that's where they hire from all the top schools. Yeah. From the IIMs also, actually, at Strategy and so we hire from, I think, Bangalore and Ahmedabad, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And we hire from the MIM programs, and those they get into as an associate and an A2 level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the difference is one level lower.
1 or 2 levels, levels. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but and that's fine, because you progress every year, you progress the level up, right?
Correct.
So, and it's great work experience at a young age. So
absolutely, I think being able to work, I think we haven't gone to that stage of discussing what your cohort was like, but I think one of the biggest sellers of studying at a top B school outside India is that you study with 70 odd nationalities, which itself is a pretty big boost to your experience, right? Anyhow, so circling back to consulting, right? One of the other questions I wanted to pose to you was this difference between, the top 3 firms that we look at and something maybe a little broader, maybe not just the top 3, but big consulting firms. Yeah. And the kind of roles that they offer in India, and how does that compare with the kind of roles that they offer, let's say, in Southeast Asia or even Europe or the US?
Yeah, I want to make it more relevant to the audience in terms of after like an undergrad, right? I think you would normally start at an analyst level, right? The business analyst. Also, the thing is, every firm names things differently. Right. They all have levels differently. Okay.
The nomenclature might be different, although it's still comparable.
Exactly, it's the same thing, but it's just differently. Some firms, a senior associate would be called a consultant, and some, it's just different words. After an undergrad, you would normally start at like an associate or analyst, whatever the firm likes to call it, level, which is base. What you have to be very aware in the Indian market particularly is there are 2 types of consulting in the Indian market. One is for India, one is working in India but for companies abroad. Okay, and that is normally not seen in markets like these.
Right.
we all work for the market here when we're here. But in India, there's always going to be two sides. So you either work for KPMG India or KPMG, the US market, UK market, XYZ. And similarly for Deloitte, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, as far as I've understood, they essentially work for the market in India. So it's a lot of more front-end work.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Yeah.
Correct. Even with McKinsey, I think there are cases where some of the projects involve associates. I guess, like all consulting firms, it's a matter of resource and cost.
Correct. But it's not as bifurcated as a Deloitte or a KPMG, where they're two completely different firms. The same McKinsey does the same, both kind of projects, basically.
Correct.
So I think that's essentially it. And what's the difference now, as you've been asking, in terms of the firms? Like if I really, and this call's being recorded, but I really have to do it, we're all doing very similar work. Like, no one is like, I wouldn't keep my eyes on one and be like, just put everything to get a McKinsey. Like, it does not make sense to put all your energy into one firm. Everyone is doing great work. You're going to end up doing very similar work. And that's also why a lot of consultants rotate around, because your basic skill set is essentially the same. The culture might be different. What I found helpful during my MBA, because I was, for the first time, looking at consulting from a global perspective of different markets and all. And I was applying to different geographies, actually, for different firms. So I interviewed, for example, with Accenture in Singapore, with Rollenberger in Amsterdam, Strategy in the Middle East. So, I had my spread that way. But what I was realizing in conversations and by speaking to people, I was trying to understand what kind of firm is doing what work in that region. And you will see strong firms in certain regions based on, when you speak to people, you'll figure out with the size, the kind of projects they're doing. Certain firms are the stronger ones in different geographies, right? So one firm might be doing really well in the US, but they might not be that strong in the Middle East. Someone might be overall, yes, they're doing similar work. But that's how I was trying to, at least, because when we apply at INSEAD, we normally, with the consulting firms, with the top consulting firms, we pick out 3 locations, top 3 geographies that we want, offices that we want to apply to.
Okay.
And that's a tough decision, honestly. Like, what, the world is an oyster. Which geography do you apply to? One, I was checking, again, how the firm is doing in that region. 2, I was checking, do they need people? For example, they have a demand of like, oh yeah, we need like 2 senior associates in this region that they might be doing really well. But do I really have a chance in getting that? Versus a firm that really is growing like crazy and they're hiring actively. So I know they need a demand, like, I have a higher shot of getting that market.
Makes sense what you're saying. Well, I mean, the question was intended to sort of explore if there are any significant differences. And I think you put that to rest, saying, no, there isn't much to choose. Whether you apply in India or abroad, the work remains pretty much the same. I guess it might have to, the differences might have to do more with the kind of competition you face when you get in. And also the kind of work hours and work culture that you face.
India and abroad, definitely, like culture is very different, very, very different for sure. And that's not India and abroad. It's India, Dubai, Amsterdam, Singapore, London, US. Work culture is going to be different for sure, right? Yeah. In general, the market cultures are very different. So, and the kind of projects they do are also different. For example, in the Middle East is driven by oil, right? Like you cannot be in a Middle East interview and be like, I'm never going to do oil and gas. I don't want to do it, trust me. But you know that the market is driven by 3-4 certain sectors very strongly. Some certain sectors would remain across, like healthcare, like finance, like banks and stuff. These sectors are the strong ones, but sometimes you will see like quantum of workload, quantum of industry would be higher with certain sectors in certain regions. And then there is targeted consulting. Some people get into directly, for example, I had a friend who joined Grant Thornton after undergrad. She was with me in economics. She joined into government consulting, So she was doing government sector right from the beginning, versus I have started now, and I'm still doing a generalist role.
Right.
You know, I did healthcare, I did telco, like I'm exploring industries.
Okay. Interesting that you transition naturally towards what you're doing, because that would have been my next sort of theme of questioning, which is to talk about, I think one of the points on our agenda today is to talk about strategy consulting, right? Because that's the most fascinating aspect of a consultant's role, is how do you craft strategy? How do you, consult firms on what they should do from a strategic point of view? So tell us more about, if as much as you can divulge, about one of the recent projects that sort of highlights maybe strategy. I'm putting you on the spot there.
Yeah. A little bit, not too much. I'm starting a new one actually. I started a new one just yesterday, day before yesterday.
Okay.
But I think overall, as you said, as a generalist, when you get in, your essential skill set is problem solving, right? And unlike the niche boutique consultings that I'm talking about, where you need like experience or you're like focused in a domain, you're applying the same thing here for the initial years of your career. You will eventually move to an industry after maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. But right now, if I enter an industry right now, if I'm starting a project, I'm not expected to know everything about that industry.
Okay.
And I think the biggest learning that comes from that in consulting is the humility part of like being humble about the fact that you don't know and you cannot know. You feel like you can't be an expert in all the industries, right? And that's, I think, something that consulting teaches you beautifully, in the sense of it's okay to not know, but it's also okay to know that you can find it out.
I don't think humility and consulting go in the same sentence.
They do not. I feel it comes to me because I genuinely, when I start a project, I know nothing about the industry. And you're consulting clients who've been there for 20 years doing the same industry. They know so much, right? And you're advising them as a fresh face in the thing. But it's also like access to resources. You speak to people, you speak to clients, the whole problem solving approach of trying to understand what's going on, speaking to partners, speaking to experts, data and all of that, and putting it all together to be able to solve it. Sounds easier when I say it that way, but that's essentially it. If I have to dive into a project, for example, I've done one telco project and one healthcare project so far. And essentially, like my first project in consulting, I had no idea whatsoever how to do. And also that's when you realize, when you get hired after an MBA, you're hired at a senior associate level, and your associates probably know way more because they've been around, And again, I would say it's the humility part again, because you're at a place where your juniors would know so much more because they've been around so much more. But that project was, for example, we were trying to solve an internal process issue. So they had a process which wasn't laid out properly. So it required me to interview almost more than 30 people at their firm, understand where all the issue lies, suggest, how they could improve that process and what the new process should look like, versus, another project could relate to anything. You could be looking at profitability. How do you increase revenue, reduce costs? Some can be more strategic in the sense of, because in the Middle East, you do a lot of government work. So, a lot of it could be government-oriented policies and whatnot. So
I know a lot of the people sitting in the audience, I'm sorry to cut you short there. I know a lot of the people sitting in the audience are suddenly thinking about their case books, thinking, hey, she's talking about profitability, costs and revenues, and immediately some of those case questions come up. So interestingly, the thought that came to my mind was that is consulting on the job similar to you solving those case studies, or is that different? Because I mean, in college, you get this feeling that, hey, it's a bunch of asking a bunch of relevant questions, getting those answers.
Yeah, you start the case by asking a lot of questions. I would say that's a very mini version of it, right? What you're trying to do in the 30 minutes of doing a case, you try to do over 3 months. So it's not exactly so easy to solve it, because I feel like in those 30 minutes, you're like, I have to crack the case. But I think this is more, I would say, yeah, just imagine a broader version of multiple more issues in between, sometimes completely not knowing what to do. So it's a journey of sorts. But for the consulting prep, if the students are doing that, I would highly recommend having a couple of buddies to do it with, the case preps, if they are doing that. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So, I mean, just to sort of, again, bring it back towards strategy and at least the kind of, I think the theme that I want to explore is within consulting, what kind of problems do you solve and how do you, start with a bunch of problems to get to work on and slowly sort of gravitate towards strategy, core strategy, because I think that's something that is at the pinnacle of, in a sense, the job that a consultant does is craft strategy. So how do you transition towards that? And in your firm, is there a setup where you have multiple maybe divisions that some of them end up transitioning towards strategy and the others maybe towards implementation and the other aspects?
We don't do a lot of implementation. We essentially do strategy work.
Okay.
So we don't do too much implementation. But what really is strategy? It's, I think, the most loosely used word in business, if I'm not wrong. Everything is like, oh, you need to have a strategy for this, you need to have a strategy for that. And what are we really trying to do is you need to have a plan to do something, right? We're not doing implementation. I think Accenture, for example, does a lot of implementation. McKinsey probably in India does a lot of implementation.
Right.
So certain firms, like maybe one-off projects, become implementation when you're too close to the client.
Right.
But the whole core of it is like, what's your plan to implement? And to develop that plan is essentially what we're doing. And you would have seen in all of these memes and jokes about consulting and PowerPoint and making multiple decks. It is a part of the job, like it comes with it. And so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, and in the sense of like implementation and strategy and devising that strategy. So
I think for a lot of people in the audience, just that bifurcation should make sense. That hey, even within the world of consulting, they look at crafting strategy or solving the problem, like you say, as different from actually implementing it, right? Not just finding a solution, but to execute it is an entirely different ballgame.
Yes, I think it's different. It is different. Implementation work is very, very different. I think exactly what I pointed out, Accenture does a lot of it. But for example, if I'm saying, in my next project, if I'm working with a firm and I'm helping them, increase their revenue or cut costs, but in real time, like, I'm seeing when it happens. I'm not directly implementing it. I'm devising the strategy of how it should be done, and I give it to their team, and then they, do it. But I'm also seeing it happen, for example, versus me being on ground. And a lot of tech stuff is very implementation, I've noticed. A lot of technology consulting is very, very implementation based, because they need to change like data server systems. They need people on ground. All of that would, how do you exactly implement it? What should the direct plan be for that? Yeah.
Okay. That does sort of put some perspective on strategy as a field, because I mean, to my mind, this is strategy is more rewarding as in terms of career than implementation is. I again
it's glorified, it's overused. It's so glorified because it could link to anything, right? Like literally anything. But think of it like if you were a corporate, a normal industry, right? I'm a bank, and I have a strategy team. I have a CSO, Chief Strategy Officer. I have a team under him. What is he doing essentially? Like they're consultants for the, in a way, right? They're devising strategy. When I was at INSEAD, I did an internship with Microsoft. My role that time was speak to people, devise. The first thing I did was went to my strategy notes, picked out the chart of what we should be doing, talking to people, breaking down the plan, blah, 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 and then doing it. So I think strategy is just literally everywhere. When you're also developing a plan for like, how do I apply for jobs? You're going to break the problem down, solve it. These are the 3 ways I can do it. These are the people I need to reach out to. These are the people I need to speak to. This is where I need to, you're devising a strategy for it. So I think it's not apples to apples, but in terms of what we glorify strategy as, it's basically planning. And, it's at least whatever I've understood so far. And I might be completely wrong. And if you speak to me 3 years later, I will be like, that's not what it is, Anand. But like whatever I've understood so far with what I've been doing, I think it's essentially, and for example, I remember Samsung hired from INSEAD, and a couple of my colleagues, my classmates went there, and they hired for GS something, like their global strategy division. And that was basically like an internal consulting of Samsung. Yeah. So.
Tata Sons has a similar setup, but they have, they have an internal strategy team that sort of works for various Tata firms, and they craft strategy. So,
yeah.
All right, interesting. So, okay, I'm all out of questions. So I think I'm going to ask the audience to start coming up with them. Guys, you can start questions in the chat. If you have any questions specifically to that you want to ask Maansi about consulting, about strategy, about studying at INSEAD, any of those things, please start shooting your questions, or you can simply raise your hand. I can unmute you.
And you can turn off your camera if you want to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want us to see you, we can. Okay, I'm getting a question here from Tanu. Tanu says, when it comes to internships, what's your opinion about the kind of internships we do, right? And so I think her question towards the very end says, like, should we do more finance-based internships? Yeah. What does it say on the CV, I guess, is her question.
Yeah. It's something like what we touched on right in the beginning, what you asked me, like, what should we do for the CV? And what makes sense. See, I can't pinpoint on what the internship should be, because I think opportunity is everywhere. And I don't know if finance-based is a direct solution to anything, right? Like, if you like finance, sure, like, go ahead and do it. I did not want to do a finance-based internship, for example. But if you enjoy it and if you think finance is interesting, definitely, like, I think it's a good space to explore. I think see it in terms of areas, like exactly what I was saying. If you're looking at consulting after your undergrad, for example, you might just want to explore an internship with a consulting firm itself if they are offering that. You might want to explore, in any of the, like, I try to explore industry. So as I told you, I try to explore the FMCG industry and the healthcare industry a little bit. And my role with the FMCG was actually slightly finance-based, which was claim management. So I was in a very small division of what they were doing. And then in the healthcare one, it was broader, it was more strategic, so to say, in the sense of, I was looking at the overall dashboard. How can we create a nice dashboard in terms of, for their business excellence team? So I think both of them showed me like light in terms of different industries, but it's 2 months, guys, like it's 2 months. So do what you enjoy, like find out, like figure out a space that you enjoy. I think right now you have so much opportunity with startups also, and we cannot undervalue it. Honestly, I don't think back then we had heard of startups also. Like we just heard big names like Google, Microsoft, blah, 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 and startups was unheard of. But right now, like venture capital, private equity, you have so much opportunity in that entire space in India right now. Correct. And it's a great space to explore.
Correct. Absolutely. I think I completely second what she said exactly, right? Go follow your passion, find something that you like to do. And I think if I'm going to take the liberty of sort of, interpreting your question a different way, saying, if the question is also on the lines of, should you choose a big brand for your internship versus maybe a startup, a smaller firm, that you want to intern with, I'd say go for both. I mean, Maansi, I think, is a big advocate of more internships, the better. So if you get the opportunity, try to keep a balance, maybe one with a big brand, maybe you won't get interesting work there, but the other with a smaller firm that offers you a larger role, right? And a more impactful role. So I think try to do both, and at the same time, I think put up your hands whenever you find the opportunity to do something different from your part. So that would be my advice to you, Tanu. I hope.
Also, I was watching an interview of Indra Nooyi yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
in which I think they asked her, what's the best advice you've got or something like that. And exactly what you said reminded me of, like, just put your hand up for the most difficult opportunities, because that's where you'll be the most visible. Right. And that hit me so much. I was like, we always run away from these difficult places. Like, just put your hand up and like.
That's a trait that definitely is something that a consulting firm looks for, right? That person to work that extra, go that extra mile. And that.
I'll do it. We did not touch upon the work-life balance, which
I gave that a clear miss, clearly, given the audience today. Too early.
They would be scared then, yeah.
Too early to start talking about that. All right, I think I have another question here. Abhishek is asking us, what would you want to advise a second-year BA program student? Is a BA program in economics, and so his question is CAT or GMAT, or if I'm an MBA aspirant, should I go for CAT? Should I go for GMAT? Should I look for? I think he's asking the same question I asked you at the start.
Yes. I would not, and advice to a second year BA program economics student, CAT GMAT is very specific. There's got to be more to you, Abhishek, in terms of, it's exactly what I was saying. I was an MBA aspirant from right where you are, from 2012, and I actually ended up doing it in 2019. And it's a journey. You need to explore yourself in the sense of try it. Speak to people, for example, from the IIMs. Speak to people from maybe ISBs or some international schools. See which one's lives or what they're doing with their careers right now. And a very good way I've realized, by the way, and I was trying to do that earlier on, was also look at certain people on LinkedIn. See what they're doing like 5 years later, and if their journey excites you, reach out to them, because I generally, some people respond, some people don't. But and that kind of journey, that this is what this person is doing, and that person must be like 5 years or 10 years older than you, and that path is exciting for you. See what they've done, and you'll find multiple tracks. There's no one path to something, right? So great, you're an MBA aspirant. Will you do it right after your undergrad, or will you do it 2 years later? Will you do it 4 years later? We can't take that call just, but again, don't put your eggs in one basket. Try to diversify.
Right. I'm just going to add a little bit of pepper and salt in her answer and embellishes, because my perspective is also that, you need to also play it a little safe. If you're genuinely thinking of an MBA, start preparing for one of these exams. I mean, from Mansi's own admission, you prepare for one and you're automatically preparing for the other. So start preparing, number one. Number two, in college, if you're already considering management, then consider the ISB's program very seriously, YLP, because it gives you entry is easier than it is through the CAT. Obviously, you're going to have to fend for, the year and 9 months that you get, before you join. So I think my advice to you would be, start preparing for one of the exams, decide which one you would prefer, and start that in college, because that's when you have a little more time than when you start working. And along the way, I think everything that Maansi has advised is spot on, right? Keep exploring your options, keep your momentum going, write it year on year, but make sure that your profile does not stagnate, right? And if you can do that, I think you're ticking all the right boxes, Abhishek. All right, I hope we've answered your question. Okay, Tanu's asking us another question. I'm going to come back to your question in a minute, Tanu, but I have one from Saloni. Saloni says, if somebody is looking forward for higher education, do internships play a developing role in any way? But she's also added saying, is it better to take some certificate courses instead? Right? It's a very interesting question. It's
what kind of higher education are we talking about?
Masters, MBA, maybe.
Okay.
She means a master's program. She's already done an undergrad. So if I'm considering a master's program, I think maybe we could answer it MIM versus, MIM or masters in economics versus an MBA, I guess.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think I remember also exploring the masters in economics versus an MBA. Again, Saloni, I don't think there's a direct answer in terms of what you should do between the two. The point is also one, I don't know what higher education you're exploring, but do you see a gap in knowledge that you need to bridge? If you do see that gap in knowledge, then sure, go ahead and do a course about it, right? If you see a gap in physical experience that you must have for that degree, for example, an MBA, I genuinely feel you're going to go study anyway. Actual on-ground corporate experience is way greater than doing a course. But for example, you're like, yeah, I need to understand this part of finance that I don't understand clearly. Sure, you have a lot of options to do it.
Right.
So I think that's how you can gauge where you feel there is a gap in your experience and learning, and how can you bridge that gap? Would it be via a Coursera course? Would it be via speaking to 10 people? Would it be by starting your own business? Would it be by interning? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sense that we want to give you, Saloni, is that it's not an A or a B. I think it should be A and B, right? Because the value that an internship brings is much more than just the industry and the work that you do. I think it's also a lot of intangible stuff. You just having worked in a professional environment, gotten orders and being punctual and etc. But
you guys are just starting off with just kickstarting your career, and if you do see yourself in the corporate world, there is all the time is good time to go and experience it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But certificate courses, on the other hand, I think my perspective is that I think they're a good option as well. But like Maansi says, I think it could probably only indicate more of an interest and inclination towards the field rather than any real expertise. Because I don't think you can do a Coursera course on Python and claim to be an expert on it, right? But what you could do is that make a case in your application for an inclination towards that field, that you could justify way of an internship and a course that you did, right? I hope that sort of answers your question, Saloni. Okay, Tanu is back. Tanu saying, okay, what would your advice be to somebody who's a novice in consulting? Would you recommend any books, or would you recommend any reading material? How does one cultivate that interest and find out more about consulting, I guess, is our question.
If not consulting, what you would have taken in academics. Okay, Tanu, so both of your questions. The first one, I must have asked you an option for what resources. Yeah, resources, I think I touched upon it very briefly. There are multiple books, definitely. I think, what was it? Crack the Case or something. I can't remember the names anymore. I will check though. I had, I think, 3 or 2 books that I was using to do my cases. To do my case prep. And what I was also saying earlier, it's good to have like a buddy system of sorts to do your cases practically, and now you can do them virtually or whatnot. But it's important to, more than reading, actually doing it, because reading is one thing. You'll get the theoretical knowledge for sure. You'll get your basic business sense and read through those crack the case books. I can't remember the names. I'll send it to Anand later. But just read through those books in terms of getting the basic sense of problem solving and structures and methodologies and whatnot. And once you have that, once you've done that studying, pick out 2-3 people, do cases with them, and it's fun. Some people hate it, but it can be fun. It can be intimidating in the beginning because you're in front of someone, the other person's interviewing you and all that, but you'll actually solve it and think of it very logically. There's some math involved also. Do some market sizing, guesstimates. Start doing problem solving that way. I think that's your.
I think the other thing that the buddy system does is that it also puts you on the other side of the table. Yes. And I think that perspective is very important, to know that somebody sitting on the other side of the table can think this way and ask these kind of questions is an interesting perspective.
Definitely.
Okay, Abhishek's asking us about academics. I'm sure you can see that.
999.
Well, I think the question comes from also this Indian B school sort of process. 100%. 80% in 12th and at least 80% in 10th, 90% in both 10th and 12th, and then a CGPA of at least 8+. Right?
Yeah. No, that was also an issue I felt somehow in ISB as well, because they look at GPAs in India, and like, for example, abroad they don't look at GPAs. So our focus in MBA is very different from what your focus in ISB is, for example, in academics. And it's unfortunate though that they give so much weightage to academics, especially McKinsey and BCG in ISB. Bain is still more neutral. I think they're more flexible, but you have so many more options as well. So that's why I think don't restrict yourself to the MBB itself. Like, explore the other consulting firms, your EY Parthenon, Strategy and A.T. Kearney, Accenture. There's just a lot, and their weightage to academics would relatively be a lot different. So I think, yes, a couple of firms and a couple of geographies have higher weightage to academics versus certain other geographies. They would, look at certain different things.
Interesting. I'm gonna also take a side sort of step on this and ask you this. So the weightage to academics, as you rightly say, is more in Indian B schools than B schools abroad. So for an INSEAD, for example, would the weightage be different for their MBA program and their MIM program? Would you say that maybe for the MBA they look at quality of experience and the leadership potential that you show, as compared to an MIM program, which I know it's a nascent program, you probably early to comment, but from your experience, do you think that an MIM program would place a greater weightage on academics? And the GMAT score maybe
relatively more, but I haven't spoken to MIM students in terms of if they're telling their GPAs or not. It might be their GPA, it might just be their GMAT, because we had to tell our GMAT scores, as far as I remember. So consulting firms, because they couldn't ask for our GPAs, they were asking for our GMAT scores. But again, it's just relativity is lower in terms of the focus on it. The focus, at least for us, becomes, what have you done? Where do you want to work? And they know once you've cracked a school, you're, you've
all the basic hygiene boxes.
You've done the base out of it. Unfortunately, in India, the number of people is so many, they have to put a filter with
academic. Yeah, absolutely. I think the general sense is that if you're applying for the top firms outside India and the top schools outside India, then a GPA of 8 or thereabouts is good to have, right? I won't say people with GPA do not get selected, but it's good to have.
If you're asking us if you should study in your third year, maybe you should.
Yes, and I would go one further step ahead and say, if your CGPA is below 7 and if you're considering taking improvement exams, go ahead and do that as well, right? I think.
But don't be stressed about it, as you correctly said. It's good to have, but definitely, if you do not have it, don't think you can't make it. Like, that's my.
And like Maansi herself says, I think academics can be sort of made up by a GMAT, by a good GMAT score.
Yeah.
Sure. Right. So,
for sure.
So consider that, Abhishek. All right. Well, any other questions, guys? It's been great. You guys have been asking us some interesting.
One more from Tanu again. I think it's not consulting. What would have taken in academics?
If not consulting, what would you have?
I mean, I was in tech before, so I was doing Microsoft, and then before that, a tech startup. I think I would love to be in that space, maybe as an alternative.
Data science?
No, I wasn't a data science person. No, I was again, more operational stuff, academics. I think I loved economics in undergrad, and I was very close to also considering a master's in economics back then. It's a great subject.
Understood. I think we have one more from Abhishek. Oh, how has DU shaped your personality? I think it's a moment of pride for all of them now.
Yeah. No, I love DU, honestly. Heart goes back there always. And I think more than shaping, like, I don't know, in terms of shaping the personality, it's a formative year, so to say, right? Those 3 years. And exactly what I was saying in the beginning, what I was doing in DU was essentially dancing. So I think that shaped me differently. more than and it's the first time you're on a free lose in terms of the house situation and everything. You're not like usse pehle you're in the school, right? Like, so bus pick up karne aati and everything, and then you're like first time. So I think DU is great. I think use it to like build your network, use it to these are the people after 5 years or after 10 years you want to stay connected with, because they're going to be doing different things in their lives, right? And DU is very well recognized internationally. I think it's a very good university that way. So I think it gives you a good platform to sell yourself in the future. It's very safe to say I went to Delhi University for my undergrad. Like, it's great.
Wonderful. Makes sense. Okay. I think we've all wrapped up. If there are any questions, I guess you guys could write into us. You can write into us at anand@mentorscapital.com. That's my email ID. Or better still, just visit the website, guys. We have our contact details listed out there. Post any questions you have. If you guys need any help from us, feel free to reach out. Well, thanks a lot, Maansi, for coming down. Like I said, it's one of those 2 precious chutti days for you, and you take early morning on one of them. So indeed, thanks a lot for that. Wish you the best with the next coming project, and hope to see more of you along the next few months.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I hope the students got something out of it.
Absolutely. It was a very candid and very frank interview. So I'm glad for that. And thanks a lot to Hansraj for hosting this, for making this happen, and wish all of you guys the very best. Please feel free to reach out to us in case you have any follow-up questions. Right? Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.